I always pictured my wedding morning differently. In my head, it was supposed to start with the sound of my mom calling out instructions in the kitchen, my dad grumbling about traffic, and my younger sister Elena trying to calm everyone down with a sarcastic joke. Instead, the first thing I noticed that morning was silence. Not the comfortable kind, but the kind that makes you instantly realize something's wrong. I got out of bed early, like every military morning I'd ever lived through. Years of being an MP had conditioned me to wake up before dawn. The house in Charleston felt unusually still. The curtains led in a thin slice of sunlight. But the place was dead quiet. No footsteps, no voices, not even the faint sound of the coffee machine that my dad insisted on using at 5 a.m. sharp. At first, I thought maybe they'd already headed out to the church to get things started. It would have been weird, but at least it would have made sense. I slipped into a robe, walked barefoot through the hallway, and listened carefully. Nothing. The entire house felt staged, like someone had gone through and removed the life from it overnight. The kitchen was spotless, too spotless for a wedding morning. No dishes in the sink, no coffee mugs half filled, no half-eaten toast left behind by my mom. Everything was wiped down, the counters shining. On the island, there was only one thing waiting for me: a white envelope with my name written on it in Elena's handwriting. I knew her handwriting too well. Back in high school, she used it to sign notes pretending to be me. And in my early years in the military, she used it to forge my name on credit applications. The looping M in my name was unmistakable. Seeing it on my wedding day made my stomach tighten. I picked it up and opened it slowly, half hoping it was something sentimental, maybe an apology for all the years of competition and drama. Instead, it was just one short line written with deliberate cruelty. "Let's see how you face the guests when we won't be appearing at your wedding." I froze. That was it. No love you. No good luck. No, we'll see you after. Just a threat disguised as a note. My hands were steady. Thanks to training, I guess, but my chest felt like someone had dropped a weight on it. I checked the rest of the kitchen, then the living room, empty. Their suitcases were gone. I opened the front door and looked out at the driveway. Their car was missing too. At that moment, I realized what they had done. Elena had convinced my parents to leave. And they hadn't just left town. They had left the country. A Paris trip? On my wedding day, I sat down at the kitchen table staring at the note. It wasn't a prank. Elena never did pranks. She did damage. She'd been jealous of me since the day I enlisted. I was the one who followed rules, got promoted, built a career in the military. She was the one who couldn't hold down a steady job and leaned on our parents for everything. Over the years, she made it her mission to pull me down, and they let her. But this leaving me on the most important day of my life, that was new. That was calculated. I thought back to when I was investigated years ago for a fraudulent loan taken out in my name. It nearly wrecked my military career before it even got started. It took months to clear my record. And guess who it traced back to? Elena. My parents said she was just young and reckless. Like that made it okay. I should have known then that they'd always choose her side. Now here, I was sitting in my wedding robe, staring at a note that proved she hadn't changed at all. The only difference was that this time she had dragged our parents into it. I stood up and went upstairs to my room. My uniform hung on the door, pressed and ready. Right beside it was the wedding dress Caleb's mom had helped me pick. I ran my hand along the fabric, reminding myself that I had a choice. I could let Elena win, or I could do what the Army had taught me. Adapt, overcome, move forward. I walked back to the kitchen, poured myself a glass of water, and sat down again. The silence of the house was no longer just quiet. It was heavy. I tried to picture what Paris must have looked like that morning. Elena leading my parents through an airport terminal, smug that she had orchestrated her final victory. She probably thought I'd cancel everything, hide in shame, and fall apart in front of Caleb's family and all the guests. I leaned back in the chair, sister's betrayal and old scars of family revenge, and shook my head. Not happening, I muttered. The thing about growing up in a house where you're always competing for scraps of approval is that eventually you stop needing it. My parents made their choice, Elena made hers, and now I had to make mine. The clock on the wall ticked past 7. The florist would be arriving soon, followed by the caterers. Guests would start showing up by noon. My phone buzzed with messages from friends checking in. None of them were from my parents, none from Elena. I grabbed the envelope again, folded it, and stuck it in the drawer. I wasn't going to let her words sit on the table like some centerpiece. She didn't deserve that spot. The kitchen was still spotless, but I finally noticed the faint scent of flowers drifting in from the backyard. The garden was filled with roses and leaves arranged the night before. My mother's favorite scent was all over the house, but she wasn't here to see it. The irony wasn't lost on me. I opened the back door and stepped outside for air. The yard was calm, chairs already set up for the ceremony. The archway was decorated just the way I'd pictured it. For a second, it looked perfect. But the truth was hanging in my chest. The people who were supposed to stand in the front row weren't coming. They'd traded me for a vacation. I let the thought burn for a moment, then forced myself to push it away. My wedding wasn't about them. It wasn't about Elena's petty games or my parents' weakness. It was about Caleb and me. And if they wanted me to break, they'd have to keep waiting. I closed the door, straightened my robe, and walked back through the silent house. There were still a million things to do before the ceremony. Guests to greet, vows to prepare, a future to step into. And none of that was going to stop because 3 people decided to get on a plane. I tightened the robe around my waist and walked upstairs, the silence pressing harder with every step. In my room, the sight of my uniform hanging beside the wedding dress set off a rush of memories I had tried to bury. The first came from my early 20s, just after basic training. I had barely settled into my first assignment when I got pulled into an office with 2 stern-looking investigators. They showed me a loan application with my name on it, my social security number, even my signature. I stared at the paper in disbelief. It was a car loan I never applied for. The payments were overdue and the lender wanted answers. For weeks I lived under suspicion, afraid my military career would end before it even began. When the truth came out, it was Elena. She had copied my signature, opened the account, and disappeared the moment payments were due. I remembered confronting her, my voice shaking with anger, while she smirked and said, "Relax. You've got good credit. They'll forgive you. You've always been the golden child." My parents didn't ground her. They didn't make her pay it back. They told me not to be dramatic, that I should understand she was young and reckless. That phrase, young and reckless, followed me like a curse. Every mistake she made, no matter how big, got swept under that label. Meanwhile, if I so much as raised my voice, I was the problem. I was the rigid one, the soldier who didn't know how to loosen up. The robe brushed against my legs as I sat on the edge of the bed, the past still biting as sharply as the morning's betrayal. Another memory pushed forward college applications. I had worked nights to save for the SAT prep courses while Elena had blown through her allowance. The night before my test, I found my ID missing. I tore my room apart. A week later, I learned she had tried to use it to sneak into a club. My parents laughed it off as sisters being sisters. I walked into the test center the next morning on 3 hours of sleep and sheer fury. I still passed, but I never forgot the casual way they dismissed her sabotage. In the Army, betrayal wasn't just disappointing, it was dangerous. You learn to trust the person next to you with your life. That's why Elena's games cut so deep. She wasn't just a selfish sister. She was someone who treated loyalty like a joke. I stood up and paced the room. The carpet muffled my steps, but in my head, I heard the sharp cadence of drill sergeants shouting commands. Stay focused, keep moving, don't let weakness show. Those commands had shaped me. But growing up in my family had tested me even harder. Another flash hit me. A Christmas years back, I had saved half of my deployment, an empty house, and military discipline holding me up pay to surprise my parents with a new washing machine after theirs broke down. I came home on leave, excited to give it to them. By the time I arrived, Elena had already convinced them to buy a car for her with her savings. Except it wasn't her savings. It was the money I wired home. Money I thought went into a joint account for the family. When I asked where it went, my mother told me, "Your sister needed it more." "You'll always land on your feet, Do." That phrase stuck to me like barbed wire. I'll always land on my feet. Translation, you don't need us, so we'll keep feeding her. They never understood that surviving didn't mean I didn't bleed. I touched the wedding dress again, my fingers brushing the lace. Caleb's mother had helped me choose it, her eyes lighting up when she saw me step out of the fitting room. You look strong, she said. Not pretty, not dainty, strong. It was the first time I felt a family member, or at least someone's family, saw me for what I really was. Meanwhile, Elena was probably parading through an airport in Paris, proud of what she'd pulled off. She had always craved the spotlight, but only by dimming mine. This wedding should have been about me, about Caleb, about the life we were building. Instead, she had staged her exit like some kind of cruel performance. I walked over to the dresser and pulled out the bottom drawer. Inside were old folders, pay stubs, orders, commendations, proof of every step I'd fought for. On top was a letter from my commanding officer years ago, congratulating me on being promoted after that loan incident had cleared. It reminded me of the lesson the Army had hammered into me over and over. You control what you can control. Everything else is noise. The problem was, Elena had always been very loud noise. I leaned against the dresser and let out a slow breath. This morning's letter wasn't just another dig. It was her final attempt to prove I couldn't stand on my own without their approval. But that assumption was her mistake. I'd been standing on my own for years, carrying scars she never even knew about. The scent of flowers from outside drifted in through the cracked window. I thought of the guests arriving later, of Caleb waiting for me, of Monica driving down from base to stand by my side. Those were the people who mattered. Those were the ones who deserved my focus. Still, the memories didn't let go easily. Betrayal had a way of sticking to you, reshaping how you saw the world. Every time Elena forged my name, every time she stole what I worked for, every time my parents looked the other way, it built the wall I stood behind now. And maybe that wall was the only reason I wasn't already on the floor crying. I closed the drawer and straightened up. The robe felt heavy on my shoulders, but my spine stayed straight. Whatever Elena thought she'd accomplished this morning, she was wrong. She wanted me broken. She wanted me humiliated. But the only thing she'd given me was another reminder of why I didn't need her anymore. My reflection in the mirror caught my eye. Hair messy, face bare, but eyes sharp. That was me. Not the helpless sister, not the forgotten daughter, the soldier, the bride, the woman who wasn't going to let Elena's jealousy write the ending. I pulled the window shut, blocking out the sound of passing cars. My hand lingered on the glass, cool against my skin, steadying me. The past had already taken enough from me. It wasn't going to take today. The glass was still cool under my hand when I finally turned away from the window and walked back into the hallway. The silence clung to everything. Not the kind you get when people are still asleep, but the kind that says the house is empty and will stay that way. I moved through each room one by one almost to prove it to myself. The living room was spotless, the couch cushions lined up neatly, the family photos all in their places. I stopped at one frame on the mantel, me in uniform, fresh out of training, smiling too big for the camera. My parents had been so proud that day, or at least they acted like it. I remembered my dad shaking hands with the recruiter like it was his accomplishment. But standing there now looking at that picture in a house they'd just abandoned, it felt like a lie carved into glass. The dining room table was bare. No half-empty coffee cups, no plates waiting to be cleared. Even the salt and pepper shakers were lined up perfectly. I touched the chair where my dad always sat, pulled it out a little, then pushed it back in. It didn't feel like home anymore. It felt like a showroom, a space people visited but a true friend from the military stands by my side didn't actually live in. Upstairs was the same. My parents' room was tidy. The bedspread pulled tight, their suitcases gone. Elena's room looked like it always did, like she hadn't lived there in years. Closet empty, dresser drawers bare. She never left much behind, never gave the house anything of herself to hold on to. That morning, it struck me that maybe she'd never really belonged here at all. She just came and went, leaving messes for others to clean up. I ended back in the kitchen, the envelope still hidden in the drawer, and leaned against the counter. The The stillness pressed in until I couldn't stand it anymore. I pushed myself away and opened the back door. The garden was quiet, but alive in a way the house wasn't. Rows of white roses lined the path. The archway set up for the ceremony, already decorated with leaves and ivy. The chairs were arranged neatly, waiting for guests. Sunlight filtered through the trees, bouncing off the white ribbons tied around the seats. It should have been beautiful, but all I felt was the hollow space where my family should have been. I stepped down into the grass, my bare feet sinking into the cool earth. The scent of roses and leaves hit me stronger outside, sweet but sharp. I thought of my mom's favorite perfume, the one she wore to every graduation, every event where she wanted to look like the perfect parent. Today, she wasn't here to wear it. She wasn't here to fuss over my hair or cry when she saw me in the dress. She was walking the streets of Paris instead, probably sipping coffee with Elena, proud of herself for choosing vacation over her daughter. My jaw tightened. I bent down and fixed one of the ribbons that had come loose on a chair. If nothing else, the garden would look perfect. If they wanted me broken, they'd have to settle for disappointed. Back inside, the quiet hit me again. I walked to the stairway and sat down halfway. The same spot I'd sat 1,000 times growing up after fights, after long shifts at work, after coming home on leave to find out I'd been replaced by whatever crisis Elena had created. The wood was smooth under my hand, polished over the years. Sitting there, I felt like two people at once. The little girl waiting for her parents to notice her, and the soldier who had long since stopped expecting anything from them. The robe slipped off one shoulder and I pulled it back into place. My throat was dry. I thought about grabbing a drink, but I didn't want to move. For the first time all morning, tears stung the corners of my eyes. I blinked hard, refusing to let them fall. Crying wasn't going to fix anything. I thought about the army again, about the times I'd been pushed past exhaustion, forced to keep moving because stopping wasn't an option. That was what this felt like. Another test, another obstacle. The difference was that in training, your unit had your back. Here in this empty house, the people who should have been my unit were boarding planes. I forced myself to stand. My legs felt heavy, but I stood anyway. If the army taught me one thing, it was that you don't get to choose when life throws you a curve. You just get to choose how you respond, and I wasn't going to respond by collapsing on the stairs. In the living room, I noticed the family Bible on the shelf. It had been passed down through generations, names and dates written in careful script. Mine was there, neat and small, wedged between birthdays and baptisms. I ran my finger over it, then shut the cover. Names on a page didn't make a family. Actions did. The clock ticked louder than it should have, reminding me that time was moving whether I was ready or not. Guests would be arriving soon. Caleb's parents would be pulling up the driveway expecting to meet mine. And when they asked where my family was, I'd have to tell them the truth that they had chosen Paris over me. I looked at my reflection in the glass door, hair messy, eyes tired, but posture straight. I wasn't going to hide. I wasn't going to let Elena's plan play out the way she wanted. The silence of the house was still there, but I stopped listening toit. I turned away from the door, straightened my robe, and started walking again, each step steadier than the last. The sound of tires crunching on gravel outside pulled me away from the glass door. I glanced out the window, half expecting it to be a delivery or some early vendor. Instead, a familiar silver SUV pulled into the meeting my fiancé's family. During the family crisis driveway, the same one I'd seen 100 times parked outside the barracks. Monica Hayes stepped out, sunglasses pushed up into her hair, a garment bag draped over one arm. She spotted me through the window and waved. Not the polite kind of wave, but the kind that said she already knew something was wrong. I opened the door before she could knock. "You look like you're about to bite someone's head off," she said, brushing past me into the house. "Where are they?" Her voice echoed in the empty hallway. She stopped, turned, and saw the silence for herself. No voices, no footsteps, no parents running around like every other wedding morning. "They're gone," I said flatly. Monica dropped the garment bag on the couch and stared at me. "Gone where?" "Paris." The word tasted bitter coming out. She blinked, waiting for me to crack a smile to tell her it was a joke. When I didn't, she shook her head. "You're kidding me." I pulled the note out of the drawer and handed it to her. She read it once, twice, then let out a low whistle. Your sister actually wrote this? I nodded. She's unbelievable, Monica muttered, crumpling the paper in her fist before setting it down on the counter. No, actually, she's predictable. Same Elena, just bigger stage. I leaned against the counter, arms crossed. She wanted me humiliated. She wanted me to cancel everything. Well, screw that. Monica pulled off her sunglasses and tossed them on the table. You're not canceling anything. You're going to walk down that aisle and look better than anyone in Paris could ever imagine. I know to peck. Her tone was sharp, the same one she'd used years ago when she was my squad leader on deployment. Back then, it was her voice that kept me moving when the heat and exhaustion had me ready to drop. Hearing it again now steadied me. I let out a long breath. It feels pathetic to admit this, but I thought maybe, just maybe, they'd show up for me today. Monica shook her head. You've carried that hope too long. You knew deep down it wasn't going to happen. They've made their choice over and over again. Today just made it crystal clear. She walked over to the window, looked out at the garden, then turned back to me. You're a soldier? You don't quit because someone else decides to flake. This is your mission today, and you finish missions. That's what you do. Her words hit like an order, but also like a reminder of who I was outside of family drama. I wasn't just a daughter or a sister. I was someone who led patrols, investigated felonies on base, stood in front of commanding officers, and made my case. I had a spine because I built it, not because anyone gave it to me. I rubbed my temples. Caleb's parents are going to ask where mine are. What am I supposed to tell them? Monica smirked. Tell them the truth. They'll see it for what it is, a family that doesn't deserve you. And you know what? They'll probably respect you even more. I wanted to believe her. I wanted to think the Turners would shrug it off, but the thought of having to explain that my entire family had ditched me wasn't easy. Monica grabbed the garment bag and unzipped it, revealing her dress. Listen, I didn't drive all the way here to watch you sit around moping. We've got work to do. Hair, makeup, getting you in that dress. Guests are coming. Cameras might be here because of Caleb, and you're not about to let Elena control the narrative. You hear me? I gave a small smile. You sound like you're prepping me for an inspection. Damn right, she said. And you're going to pass. Her energy filled the room, breaking the heaviness that had weighed me down all morning. She busied herself with setting up, laying out makeup brushes she'd brought along, pulling bobby pins from her purse like she had been planning this for weeks. I sat down, letting her work. The brush tugged through my hair. The powder settled on my skin. For once, I let someone else take control. Monica hummed under her breath. An old country song she used to blast in the Humvee on patrol. It brought me back to dusty roads and the strange calm that came from knowing exactly who had your back. You know, she said, pinning the last strand in place. This might be the best thing they could have done for you. I raised an eyebrow. Really? Yeah, think about it. No fake smiles, no drama at the reception, no Elena trying to upstage you. It's just you, Caleb, and the people who actually give a damn. That's a win. I let her words sink in. She was right. As painful as their wedding begins under the shadow of family drama absence was, it also meant I wouldn't have to brace for the constant undercurrent of criticism and competition. Today could be about me without interruption. The thought loosened something in my chest. I looked in the mirror when she finished, hardly recognizing the reflection. Not because of the makeup, but because of the calm in my eyes. Monica put her hands on my shoulders. That's the face of someone who knows she's got nothing to prove anymore. The knot in my stomach eased a little. She was right again. My parents' absence didn't erase my worth. Elena's cruelty didn't define me. The people who mattered were here or on their way. I stood smoothing the robe and caught sight of the wedding dress again. It no longer looked like a reminder of who wasn't here. It looked like the next step I was about to take, one that had nothing to do with Elena or Paris. Monica grabbed her purse and slung it over her shoulder. All right, soldier. Time to get this mission rolling. I nodded, pulling the dress from its hanger and holding it against me, the fabric cool and solid in my hands. For the first time that morning, the silence of the house didn't feel like abandonment. It felt like space. Space I could finally fill with my own choices, my own future. and the people who were standing by me for the right reasons. I had barely set the dress back down when the doorbell rang. Monica glanced at me, then walked quickly to answer it. Through the frosted glass, I saw two figures standing tall, perfectly put together in a way that screamed money but not arrogance. When the door opened, Caleb's parents stepped inside, their presence filling the entryway more than any furniture ever could. Henry Turner shook Monica's hand firmly, then turned to me with a warm smile that crinkled the edges of his eyes. Evelyn followed close behind, her perfume light, her voice even lighter. "Marissa, sweetheart, you look radiant already. Where are your parents?" The question landed like a stone in my stomach. Monica shot me a quick look as if to say, "Be straight with them." I took a breath and met Evelyn's eyes. "They're not coming. They left for Paris this morning." Evelyn blinked, confusion flickering across her face. Henry frowned, clearly trying to process what he just heard. "On your wedding day?" he asked, the disbelief thick in his tone. I nodded. Yes, it was their choice. The silence stretched a beat too long, the weight of their absence louder than words. Then Evelyn stepped forward, wrapped her arms around me, and said, "Then today you have us. You are our daughter, Marissa. Don't think for a second that you're standing alone." Her embrace caught me off guard. For a split second, my body stiffened, expecting judgment or pity, but there was none, only warmth. She smelled faintly of roses, the kind you'd find in the gardens of old Charleston estates. It reminded me of what a mother's hug should feel like. Henry clapped me gently on the shoulder, the way a commanding officer might. "Listen," he said, voice steady. "Families can make mistakes, some bigger than others, but you're joining ours today and we don't walk out on our own." Something in me unclenched hearing that. For once, I didn't feel like I had to defend myself or explain why my own blood had abandoned me. I could just let their words stand. Monica, never one to let a heavy moment sit too long, spoke up. "Well, now that we've got reinforcements, it's time to get this bride ready." She gestured toward the dress and started directing Evelyn as if she'd been assigned a mission. Evelyn laughed and joined in, adjusting the hem of the gown as I stepped into it, careful not to wrinkle the fabric. The dress slid into place, and for a moment I saw myself in the mirror, surrounded by people who wanted me there. Not by obligation, not by guilt, but by choice. Henry stood back, hands in his pockets, watching with quiet pride. "Caleb's a lucky man," he said almost to himself, then louder. "And you, Marissa, you carry yourself like someone who's been through worse than this and still came out stronger. That's exactly the kind of woman we hoped would join our family." It hit me harder than I expected. My parents had never said anything like that. They never called me strong, never acknowledged what I had survived or achieved. To hear it from Henry on this day filled a part of me I didn't realize was starving. Evelyn stepped back and clapped her hands. Perfect. Absolutely cameras rolling. A family revenge story goes public perfect. Let the world see how much you deserve this. The moment might have ended there, but the sound of cars pulling up outside reminded us the day wasn't waiting. Guests began arriving, voices carrying through the open windows as laughter and greetings filled the air. From the second-floor window, I could see women in bright dresses stepping out of cars, men straightening ties, children running ahead toward the garden. I swallowed hard. This was it. The house that had felt so empty an hour ago was now alive with people. Yet the front row would still be missing the faces I once thought I couldn't do without. Evelyn noticed the shift in my expression. She leaned in and said softly, "Don't look for them. Look at who's here. These are the people who want to celebrate you." Her words grounded me. I nodded, adjusting the veil Monica had pinned into place. Henry cleared his throat. "I'll head outside and make sure everything's ready. We've got guests to greet. Don't keep them waiting too long, soldier." The last word carried a note of respect, not mockery. I gave him a small smile. "Yes, sir." He grinned and headed toward the garden. Evelyn followed, pausing just long enough to squeeze my hand before stepping out. Monica stayed behind, giving me a once-over as if she were inspecting a recruit. "You're good," she said finally. "You're solid. They can't touch you today." Her words landed with the weight of a vow. The quiet from earlier seemed distant now, drowned out by the sounds of guests arriving, voices blending into a rising hum. The house wasn't empty anymore. It was full in all the right ways. I straightened my posture, adjusted the dress once more, and let the voices carry through the open window. Whatever Paris looked like right now, it had nothing on this. The noise outside swelled as more cars lined the street. Doors slammed and voices drifted into the house. Laughter floated through the open windows, mixed with the click of heels on the walkway and the shuffle of chairs being pulled across the lawn. I moved toward the front of the house, the dress brushing the floor, Monica trailing behind me like a guard making sure I didn't bolt. Through the side window, I spotted guests stepping into the garden. A college friend waved at someone I barely recognized. Two of Caleb's business partners shook hands with a distant cousin of his, their polished shoes sinking slightly in the grass. The sight should have been comforting, but a murmur kept surfacing in the crowd. I caught fragments. "Where's her family?" And not even her parents? Whispers disguised as polite conversation. I gripped the doorframe tighter, the wood pressing into my palm. Monica noticed and leaned in. "Let them talk. People always talk. What matters is you walking down that aisle. That shuts everybody up." I let out a short laugh. More breath than humor, but it helped. I reminded myself that whispers couldn't kill me. I'd survived worse. Evelyn appeared in the hallway, graceful, even with her heels sinking slightly on the old wooden floors. She placed her hand gently on my arm. "Don't pay attention to anyone out there. They came to celebrate you, not judge you. If they have questions, let them wonder. You don't owe anyone explanations." Her calm tone contrasted the buzz of chatter outside. I nodded, grateful, then turned toward the mirror one last time. My reflection stared back, veil in place, eyes sharp, shoulders squared. For once, I didn't see the little girl desperate for approval. I saw someone ready to step into the spotlight. Family or no family? Henry poked his head in. "We're ready out there. The officiant is in place. Guests are seated." His voice carried the steady assurance of a man who'd managed boardrooms, but he softened it when his eyes landed on me. "You look like you could take on the world," Monica muttered. "She already has." End of 2. The music started faintly, the kind that makes a crowd quiet down in expectation. I inhaled, the veil shifting slightly with my breath. Monica straightened the back of my dress. Evelyn adjusted the edge of my veil, and Henry stepped aside to let us pass. As I reached the garden entrance, the shift in atmosphere was immediate. The chatter died, replaced by the collective hush of guests turning their heads. Rows of faces blurred together, some curious, some smiling, a few probably still wondering where my family was. But front and center, Caleb stood waiting, his vows of love and strength in the middle of betrayal eyes locked on mine. For a second, the world narrowed to just him. His expression wasn't pity. It wasn't even surprise. It was steady pride, like he'd known all along this was how it would play out. That steadiness anchored me. The officiant's voice welcomed everyone, but my focus stayed on Caleb. I took my first step onto the aisle. Monica at my side like an honorary maid of honor. The grass crunched lightly under my shoes, the faint scent of roses rising with every move forward. The crowd shifted. Phones lifted for photos. Murmurs quieted. I felt the weight of eyes on me, but instead of shrinking, I lifted my chin higher. Every step was deliberate, not rushed. Halfway down the aisle, a child's voice piped up. "Where's your mom?" The question carried more loudly than the whispers had. A ripple of awkward laughter followed. My chest tightened, but I kept walking. Monica shot a glare into the crowd that could have silenced a drill sergeant. By the time I reached the front, Caleb extended his hand. His palm was warm, steady. I slid mine into his and felt the tightness ease. He gave me the slightest nod, one that said, "You made it. You're here." The officiant began the opening words, but the noise of my own thoughts nearly drowned him out. Standing there, I realized that this moment wasn't ruined. Elena hadn't won. My parents hadn't stolen anything. I was here in front of everyone who mattered, marrying the man I loved, with people around me who chose to stand with me. That was more family than blood had ever given me. Evelyn sat in the front row, her eyes misty, her smile unwavering. Henry rested a hand on her shoulder, his posture protective. Monica stood just off to the side, arms crossed, scanning the crowd like she was ready to eject anyone who so much as whispered again. The officiant's words pulled me back. Marriage is not about perfection. It's about commitment, even when things aren't perfect. The line hit harder than it should have, like it was meant for me alone. I tightened my grip on Caleb's hand, feeling the truth in it. Nothing in my life had been perfect. Certainly not my family, but commitment, the kind he was offering me, the kind Monica and the Turners had shown, was worth everything. The breeze shifted, carrying the faint sound of a car driving away down the street. For a moment, I thought about my parents in Paris, sipping wine, Elena smirking. They probably pictured me crumbling, ceremony canned, guests sent home in confusion. The reality was the opposite. I was standing taller than I ever had. Caleb leaned slightly toward me, just enough that only I could hear. "You're incredible." It wasn't dramatic, wasn't staged. It was simple, but it carried more weight than anything my family had ever said. My throat tightened, but I kept my expression calm. The officiant invited the crowd to bow their heads for a moment of reflection. The garden went quiet, birds chirping faintly in the distance. I let the silence settle. But this silence was nothing like the one in the house that morning. This one was alive, filled with people present for the right reasons. When the officiant raised his head again, the ceremony continued, but my focus stayed on Caleb, on the warmth of his hand, on the knowledge that I wasn't standing alone. The voices in the crowd, the whispers, the missing faces, they faded into background noise. What mattered was right in front of me, steady, waiting, and real. The officiant's voice carried steady through the garden, but out of the corner of my eye, I caught a flash of light. Then another. At first, I thought it was just guests snapping photos. But when I shifted slightly, I saw the truth. A camera crew stood at the edge of the lawn, tripod set up, a guy with a boom mic, another adjusting the focus on a shoulder rig. I leaned toward Caleb just enough to whisper, "Seriously? You invited the press?" He gave me a small, almost guilty smile. "Local station. They asked to cover it. They like stories about business leaders getting married." His grip on my hand tightened a little. "I didn't think it would bother you." I let out a short breath through my nose. Of course the Turners would attract attention. Caleb's projects were always in the paper. New housing developments, donations to veterans groups, community events. Him getting married was the kind of thing that drew coverage. I just hadn't prepared to be in the spotlight. Paris shock. My sister's cruel plan backfires today. The camera panned across the guests, then landed on me. A bright light flared, softer than military floodlights, but still enough to make me blink. I felt the heat rise in my cheeks, but I squared my shoulders. If Alina had been counting on me to look small and abandoned, then maybe this was the best payback. She'd be watching from some hotel room eventually, and she'd see me not just standing, but shining. The officiant kept going, unbothered by the cameras. Behind him, the garden looked like something out of a magazine spread. Flowers arranged just so, ribbons fluttering in the breeze, every chair filled. Evelyn had done her work well. Monica stood stiff near the back, arms folded. She caught my eye and gave a quick nod like a silent command to hold my ground. I straightened my spine and fixed my gaze on Caleb. The cameras could take what they wanted. I wasn't performing for them. A photographer stepped closer to the aisle, snapping shots of me and Caleb holding hands. For once, I didn't feel self-conscious. Uniform training kicked in chin level, posture steady, eyes forward. Not a soldier on duty, but not far from it either. The officiant asked us to face each other fully. I turned toward Caleb, blocking out everything else. His eyes crinkled slightly at the corners, not from nerves, but from warmth. He wasn't worried about the cameras. He was focused on me. A murmur rippled through the guests when another cameraman moved closer, practically in the front row. I heard someone whisper, "It's going to be on the evening news." A part of Meten said, but then I thought about the letter Elena had left that morning. The cruel line about how I'd face the guests without them. If she ever saw this footage, she'd realize I didn't just face them. I owned the moment. The officiant's voice rose slightly as he spoke about commitment, about unity. The cameras circled, capturing every word. I kept my breathing even, counting in my head the way I had during long stakeouts on base. Calm in, steady out. When the officiant invited Caleb's father to step forward to give a short blessing, Henry did so without hesitation. He cleared his throat and said, "Today is not just about two people joining together. It's about building a family. Even when family looks different than what you expected. And I can say with pride that Marissa is already one of us." The crowd applauded lightly. The cameras zoomed in. My throat tightened, but not with sadness, with relief. For the first time that day, I felt like I wasn't filling in for something missing. I was simply being welcomed. Evelyn dabbed at her eyes with a tissue, her smile steady. The cameraman caught it, and I didn't even care. Let them film it. Let everyone see? The officiant guided us back to the vows, the moment everyone waited for. My heart raced, not from nerves about Caleb, but from the awareness that everything happening was now permanent on tape. Every glance, every word, every flicker of expression, it would all live beyond this day, and maybe that was exactly the justice it needed. Elena's words were scrolled on paper and hidden in a drawer. Mine were about to be spoken into a microphone and broadcast to anyone with a television. The breeze shifted again, rustling the flowers on the archway, carrying faint laughter from the kids running near the back rows. The cameras followed even that. Nothing would be left out. I took another breath, squared my shoulders, and focused on Caleb's face. He smiled at me, calm, ready, the kind of steady presence that made the rest of it fade. The cameras could roll as long as they wanted. They'd capture a woman who wasn't broken, wasn't ashamed, and wasn't hiding. The officiant looked between us, his voice clear. "Now Caleb and Marissa will share their vows." The garden hushed, the cameras adjusted, and the moment stretched wide open. The hush that followed the officiant's words felt heavier than silence. Guests leaned forward waiting, cameras pointed directly at us, their red lights blinking. I tightened my grip on Caleb's hand, not because I was nervous about marrying him, but because I knew every word I spoke would echo beyond this garden. Caleb went first. His voice was steady, deeper than usual, carrying enough that everyone in the back row could hear. "Marissa," he began, his eyes locked on mine. "I knew from the first time I met you that you weren't someone who bent under pressure. You stood hundreds of calls after my family revenge wedding taller than anyone in the room, and it made me want to stand taller too. You don't just live with strength, you inspire it. Today, I promise to stand with you, not in front of you, not behind you, but beside you. For every day we have, it wasn't flowery or scripted. It was him, plain and direct, and that made it hit harder." A murmur of approval rippled through the crowd. Evelyn sniffled softly in the front row. Henry nodded with the firm satisfaction of a man who already knew his son had chosen well. Then it was my turn. I could feel every camera on me, every guest waiting, the officiant's patient gaze. I swallowed, tightened my posture, and let the words come without overthinking. "Caleb," I said, my voice clear. "I've spent my whole life being told to be tougher, stronger, stricter, because someone always thought I wasn't enough. But you never once asked me to prove anything. You just saw me exactly as I am. I promise you the same. I will see you, respect you, and fight with you, not against you. No one gets to walk away from this because this is our family, and we don't leave family behind." That the last line wasn't planned, but it came out sharp, ringing truer than anything else I'd said. My chest burned, not from embarrassment, but from the release of something I'd carried too long. Applause broke out louder than the officiant expected. He smiled, gave a small nod, then continued the ceremony. The rings were brought forward by one of Caleb's younger cousins, a boy so nervous his hands shook as he placed them on the small pillow. Caleb slid mine on first, his fingers brushing mine just long enough to ground me again. Then I slid his into place, the metal cool against my skin. By the power vested in me, the officiant announced, "I now pronounce you husband and wife. You may kiss." Caleb didn't hesitate. He pulled me in, kissed me firmly, and the crowd erupted into applause. The camera zoomed closer, capturing every detail. For once, I didn't mind the lens. Let Elena see it. Let my parents see it. They could sip coffee in Paris all they wanted. but the world had just witnessed something they couldn't erase. As the guests stood and clapped, I glanced briefly at Evelyn. She was dabbing her eyes again, but smiling wide. Henry clapped Caleb on the back, then looked at me with the kind of fatherly pride I hadn't realized I craved. Monica gave me a subtle thumbs up from the side, her expression a stow as ever, but softened at the edges. The officiant stepped back, gesturing toward the aisle. Caleb took my hand, and together we turned to face the crowd. The sight was overwhelming, rows of people cheering, standing, reaching for photos. The archway behind us framed the moment, flowers shifting slightly in the breeze. Walking back down the aisle, the sound of applause and cheers surrounded us. Some guests leaned in to whisper congratulations. Others reached out to touch my arm as I passed. I kept my eyes forward, but inside the weight that had pressed on me all morning finally lifted. The cameras followed us out, recording every step. I caught sight of one reporter speaking into a microphone, her voice carrying faintly, "A beautiful ceremony here in Charleston with local businessman Caleb Turner and decorated military police officer Marissa Kane tying the knot." The words hit me harder than I expected. Decorated military police officer? Note abandoned daughter, not forgotten sister. That was who I was to the world now. Caleb squeezed my hand as we reached the garden gate. He leaned close, whispering, "You did amazing." I smiled back at him, my voice low but steady. "So did you." Behind us, guests were already making their way toward the reception area, the hum of conversation rising again. The camera crews shifted, capturing shots of the tables, the flowers, the laughter spilling across the lawn. The story was out now. Whatever Paris looked like at that exact moment, it couldn't compete with this. The officiant gathered his books. Evelyn began greeting guests. Henry moved toward the reporters, clearly comfortable speaking to them. Monica sidled up next to me, her grin lopsided. "Well, soldier, mission accomplished. You didn't just survive, you owned it." I let out a breath, the first easy one of the entire morning. She was right. The hardest part was done. The vows were silent revenge, choosing peace over toxic family spoken. The cameras had captured them, and no amount of Paris luxury could overwrite the truth of what had just unfolded here. Caleb's arms slid comfortably around my waist as we moved toward the reception tables. The garden was filled with clinking glasses, bursts of laughter, and flashes of cameras. The scene wasn't what I had pictured years ago, but it was better, stronger, real. The ribbon chairs, the scent of roses, the hum of voices, every piece of it stitched together into something that felt whole, even without the people who'd chosen to leave. And as the sun dipped slightly behind the trees, painting the lawn in warm light, I knew that what had started in silence that morning had turned into something louder, stronger and far more lasting than anything my sister or my parents could take away. While the reception in Charleston carried on with the clinking of glasses and the shuffle of guests finding their seats, an entirely different scene unfolded thousands of miles away. In a sleek hotel lounge in Paris, my sister sat with our parents, wine glasses in hand, the Eiffel Tower glowing faintly in the distance through the tall windows. Elena had dressed for the occasion, her heels kicked off under the table, her hair styled as if she were attending her own gala. My mother wore a new silk scarf she'd bragged about buying earlier in the day, and my father leaned back in the chair with that smug, satisfied look he always carried after making what he thought was a bold decision. Elena scrolled lazily through the television channels until she stopped short. "Wait, go back," she ordered, leaning forward. My father frowned, picked up the remote, and flipped back one channel. There it was, the local Charleston news segment. The reporter's voice was crisp, cheerful. This afternoon, Caleb Turner, prominent businessman and philanthropist, married decorated military police officer Marissa Kane in a beautiful garden ceremony right here in Charleston. The footage cut to me walking down the aisle, veil catching the sunlight, Caleb standing proudly at the altar. The camera zoomed close enough to catch the steady look in my eyes. Elena froze, wine glass halfway to her lips. "You've got to be kidding me," she hissed. My mother's scarf slipped from her shoulders as she leaned closer to the television. "Is that live? Is this happening now?" My father sat up straighter, his face paling as the reporter continued. The event drew both local attention and coverage from several stations, highlighting not only the Turner family's role in the community, but also Marissa's military service record. That the screen shifted to Caleb's parents giving short interviews, Evelyn praising me as a woman of remarkable strength, and Henry calling me the best match our family could ask for. The hotel room went silent except for the television. Elena's jaw clenched so tightly I could imagine her teeth grinding. She slammed the wine glass onto the table, the red liquid sloshing over the rim. She knew she planned this. She wanted us to look like idiots. On. My father rubbed his temples, muttering, "Millionaire family. Since when does she—" He trailed off, still staring at the screen as if seeing me for the first time. The footage returned to the vows. My voice carried across the hotel speakers. "I will see you, respect you, and fight with you, not against you. No one gets to walk away from this because this is our family, and we don't leave family behind." The irony wasn't lost on them. My mother's lips trembled, her hand clutching the armrest. "She said that because of us," she whispered as if confessing something she didn't want Elena to hear. Elena shot her a glare. "Don't you dare act guilty now." "She's twisting it. She's making us look like the villains." The broadcast showed the kiss, the cheers, the camera flashes, guests clapping, smiling, confetti tossing through the air, Caleb's arms around me as if nothing in the world could shake him. Elena stood abruptly, pacing the room like a caged animal. "This is humiliating. Do you understand what people are going to think? They'll say we abandoned her and she upgraded without us. We'll look pathetic." My father didn't answer. His eyes stayed glued to the screen, watching as Caleb and I walked back down the aisle, the crowd cheering. He'd always measured people by money and reputation. And now, for the first time, he realized I had 3 years later. Military success and new family, both in spades without any of them at my side. The reporter closed the segment with a smile. It was a day to remember, not only for the Turners and their guests, but for the entire Charleston community. The logo flashed, then the program cut to commercials. Elena grabbed the remote and hurled it onto the couch. She thinks she's better Thanos now. Just wait. She'll answer when she realizes family doesn't disappear that easily. My mother shifted uncomfortably, her voice low. "Elena, she didn't need us. She never did. And maybe we're the ones who stop." Elena snapped. "Don't you dare take her side." But the damage was already done. The image of me on television, radiant and celebrated, wasn't something Elena could erase with a sharp word or a forged signature. It was public. It was undeniable. Back in Charleston, I laughed at something Caleb whispered into my ear as we made our way toward the reception table. The sound carried light and unforced, and the camera caught it too. The contrast between my joy and the storm brewing in that Paris hotel room couldn't have been clearer. Elena stood with her arms crossed, pacing harder, her shoes clicking against the marble floor. My father finally spoke, his voice heavy. "She doesn't need us anymore." For once, my mother didn't argue. She sat quietly, staring at the blank screen after the broadcast ended, her scarf pooling in her lap. Elena let out a bitter laugh, sharp and humorless. "We'll see about that, Lay." But even as she said it, her reflection in the window betrayed her. The twist in her mouth, the fury in her eyes, the fear underneath. Because for the first time in her life, Elena Kane wasn't in control of the story. The music at the reception was light, the kind that let people talk over it without raising their voices. Glasses clinked as servers moved through the crowd, trays of champagne catching the sunlight. I sat beside Caleb at the long table near the garden arch, smiling when guests leaned over to congratulate us. For a while, I let myself sink into the rhythm of it all, the laughter, the small talk, the easy warmth. But when I finally picked up my phone from where it sat face down on the dresser inside the house, the screen nearly blinded me with notifications. Missed calls stacked one on top of another, filling the entire display. The number at the top read 92. I blinked, locked the screen, then unlocked it again, but the number only grew as the phone vibrated violently in my hand. By the end of the hour, it would cross 200. Voicemails flooded in too. I pressed play on the first without thinking. My mother's voice burst through, sharp and frantic. "Marissa, you need to call us back right now. We just saw everything. Why didn't you tell us it would be televised? Do you have any idea how this makes us look? Her voice cracked on the last word. I clicked to the next. My father this time. His tone clipped angry. This isn't funny. We left because we thought you'd understand. You can't just throw away your family like this. Another voicemail, then another. Some angry, some pleading, some confused. Each one layered over the last until it was nothing but noise. Finally, I heard Elena's voice. Congratulations, I guess. You really think marrying into money makes you better than the rest of us? Answer the phone, Marissa. We're still your family whether you like it or not. Her tone carried that same old superiority, the one she used every time she wanted to remind me I'd never escape her shadow. But this time it rang hollow. I scrolled through the messages again, my thumb trembling, though not from fear. The sheer desperation, the whiplash between rage and pleading. It was like watching them scramble for control after realizing they'd lost it. Another voicemail blinked in, and I hesitated before pressing play. It wasn't Elena this time. It was Adam, my cousin. His voice was softer, uncertain. Hey, Marissa, I saw you on television. You looked incredible. Honestly, like a movie star. I know things are messy, but I just wanted you to know you deserve it. For the first time since I picked up the phone, my throat tightened. Adam had always been the quiet one, caught between the chaos of Elena and the indifference of my parents. Hearing him speak without bitterness cut through the noise like a clean edge, but as the phone kept buzzing, the screen lighting quiet ending to a family revenge story up over and over with their names, I set it face down on the table again. I wasn't going to let them hijack the day. Monica slipped in through the doorway, carrying 2 glasses of champagne. She handed one to me, her eyes flicking toward the vibrating phone. Looks like the circus is back in town, she said dryly. You have no idea, I muttered, taking the glass. She smirked. I don't need to. I can hear it buzzing from outside. I picked up the phone once more, looked at the endless list of missed calls, then put it back down, screen first. They saw it all, I said, my voice low. Every word, every vow, every second of it. Monica leaned against the dresser, crossing her arms. Good. Let them choke on it. They wanted you broken. And instead, they got front row seats to you, thriving. Her words hit exactly where I needed them. I took a sip of champagne, the fizz sharp against my tongue. Back outside, their reception rolled on. Caleb's father laughed with a group of guests. Evelyn danced with one of the nieces, and the sound of clapping followed her. Caleb found me by the doorway, slipping his arm around my waist. Everything okay? He asked, his eyes flicking toward the phone. Everything's fine, I said, meaning it. The music shifted into something faster. Couples filling the makeshift dance floor. For a moment, the vibration of the phone on the wooden dresser felt like background percussion to the celebration outside. But unlike the music, it never stopped. At one point, Evelyn wandered inside, curious. She noticed the phone buzzing endlessly on the table and raised her brows. Persistent, aren't they? I gave her Asmal's smile. That's one word for it. She squeezed my hand. You don't owe anyone your peace. Remember that. Then she left as gracefully as she'd entered, her perfume lingering faintly behind. As the evening wore on, the number on my phone climbed past 300 missed calls. Messages stacked until the notification bar looked endless. But every time I glanced at the screen, I felt less pulled toward it. Their voices had been the soundtrack of my childhood, demanding, guilt-tripping, commanding. Now they were just noise competing with the laughter outside and losing badly. Caleb and I danced under the string lights strung across the garden. Guests clapped along, cameras still capturing bits and pieces of the celebration. The night air was warm, filled with the scent of roses and barbecue from the caterers. For once, the world felt balanced. After a few songs, we stepped aside, catching our breath. I slipped back into the house, phone still buzzing on the dresser. I picked it up, scrolled through the names Mom, Dad, Elena, over and over again. Finally, I pressed the power button until the screen went black. The sudden silence was absolute, like cutting a cord that had been wrapped around my chest for years. I set the phone down and walked back outside, the sound of laughter growing louder as I joined the crowd again. The string lights glowed, the champagne sparkled in glasses, and Caleb's arms slid naturally back around me. The buzzing was gone. The night was ours. The reception carried on well into the evening, voices mellowing as the sun sank low over the garden. String lights flickered on, casting a soft glow across the tables. I stood near the edge of the lawn, holding Caleb's hand while guests mingled, the hum of conversation drifting like a tide. For the first time that day, I let myself breathe without the weight pressing down on my chest. Caleb excused himself to talk to a group of his colleagues, leaving me a moment alone by the rose bushes. I leaned against the wooden post of the archway, my dress brushing the grass, and tilted my head back to look at the stars. The silence was different here, not empty like the house that morning, not frantic like the endless buzzing of my phone. This was quiet that felt earned. I thought about the calls again. The way my mother's voice had cracked, the anger in my father's tone, Elena's smug attempt to pull me back into the chaos. They had shouted, begged, cursed, all from thousands of miles away. And I hadn't answered once. That silence wasn't weakness. It was power. For years, I had wasted breath trying to explain myself to people who didn't want to understand. Every decision became an argument. Every achievement minimized. I enlisted to build a future, and they called it a phase. I got promoted, and they said it was luck. I survived deployment, and they accused me of abandoning Elena. Every word I ever spoke to them had been bent, twisted, or ignored. Not this time. The stars above stretched wide, cold and steady, reminding me of nights on base when we'd sit outside after long shifts, trading stories, and pretending the world wasn't as heavy as it was. Those nights taught me something. Silence could heal. It could give you space to breathe, to think, to be. Tonight, silence wasn't just space. It was the weapon I finally got to choose. I heard footsteps behind me, steady and familiar. Caleb's arm slid around my waist, his chin brushing my shoulder. "You okay?" he asked softly. I nodded, keeping my eyes on Thesky. "Yeah, I really am." He kissed the side of my temple, his warmth steady against me. "Good, because that's all I wanted today, to see you happy, no matter what else happened." The words sank deep, easing something I hadn't realized I was still holding on to. I turned to face him fully, looking at the man who had stood steady while my own family tried to cut me down. His eyes were calm, not searching for cracks, not asking for more than I was already giving. "I don't think I've ever been happier," I said, the truth ringing sharp and clean. Caleb smiled, pulling me closer. Around us, the laughter of guests rose again as someone toasted loudly near the tables. Monica's voice cut through with some sarcastic remark that got the crowd roaring. For once, I didn't feel like I was outside looking in. I was part of it. The silence between me and my phone was louder than the noise of the party. Every second I didn't pick it up. Every moment I didn't explain myself felt like reclaiming ground I should have owned years ago. That was the revenge Elena would never see coming. Not anger, not confrontation, but being completely irrelevant to the life I was building. Caleb must have seen something in my expression, because he tightened his arm around me. "You don't owe them anything," he said quietly as if reading my thoughts. "I know," I answered. And this time I meant it. The night moved on. More dancing, more laughter. I joined in, letting Monica pull me onto the floor for one ridiculous song that had us both laughing until we cried. Guests clapped along, the cameras catching flashes of it all, though I hardly noticed anymore. The story wasn't theirs to tell. It was mine. When the last song played and the crowd began to thin, I walked Caleb back toward the house, my dress trailing behind me, my shoes dangling from one hand. The night air was cool, brushing against my skin in a way that reminded me I was still alive, still moving forward. Inside, the phone sat on the dresser where I'd left it, dark and silent now that I'd powered it off. For years, that phone had been leash calls from my parents dictating what I owed them, Elena's messages dripping with manipulation. Tonight, it was nothing more than a black screen. I didn't need to smash it or throw it away. Leaving it untouched was punishment enough. Caleb placed his jacket over my shoulders, guiding me back outside. The last of the guests waved their goodbyes, headlights disappearing down the road one by one. Monica hugged me tightly, her voice firm in my ear. "Proud of you, soldier. You did this your way. Couldn't have done it without you," I replied honestly. Shep pulled back, giving me that look she always had before a mission ended. Equal parts pride and warning. Don't let anyone take this from you, not ever. I promised her I wouldn't. Later, when it was just me and Caleb standing in the quiet garden under the stars, he rested his forehead against mine. The world felt still, as if waiting for me to decide how to define it from now on. I didn't need dramatic speeches or confrontations. The silence was enough. It carried all the weight of what I'd chosen to live, to love, to build something separate from the family that tried so hard to drag me down. And as Caleb pulled me close, his arms anchoring me in the cool night, I whispered the words I'd been holding on to all day, simple and unshakable. I'm fine, and for the first time I didn't just say it. I believed it. 3 years passed faster than I would have believed. Some days felt like a blur of training schedules and long commutes, while others stretched endlessly with paperwork and late-night phone calls. But looking back, the timeline is clear. Years since the wedding. 3 years since I turned my phone face down and never picked it back up for them. Caleb and I settled into life just outside Chicago near Lake Michigan. Our house overlooked the water, the waves breaking against the shore in a rhythm that reminded me of cadence calls during marches. The morning started with sunlight spilling into wide windows, coffee brewing in the kitchen, and Caleb reading the paper out loud just to make me roll my eyes at his commentary. It was steady, it was warm, and for the first time in my life, it was mine. In those 3 years, my career pushed forward too. I was promoted to first sergeant, a milestone that carried more weight than any family approval ever could. I trained younger MPs, drilled discipline into new recruits, and found myself giving speeches at base events about leadership and resilience. Standing on those stages, I sometimes caught myself thinking back to Elena's smug smirk to my parents' indifference. They had bet against me every step of the way. But here I was, not just surviving, but being held up as an example. Monica was still by my side, though in a different way. After years of service, she transitioned into civilian life, and together, we started something new. A training center for female veterans adjusting back into the world outside the uniform. We rented out an old brick building in Evanston, refurbished it with paint and sweat equity, and opened the doors as the Haven Training Center. The first few weeks were rocky. Only a handful of women showed up, nervous, cautious, unsure if they even belonged. But soon word spread. The place became a second home for women who had felt adrift. Women who needed someone to remind them that what they'd learned in the service didn't vanish once they took off the uniform. We taught self-defense, interview prep, physical training, and more than anything, confidence. The local paper ran a story about us in the second year. The headline read, "From Military to Mentorship. Kane and Hayes build haven for women veterans." The article included a photo of me and Monica standing in front of the building, arms crossed, grinning like we'd just pulled off a heist. Caleb framed the clipping and hung it in the hallway at home. Evelyn and Henry were our biggest supporters. They donated supplies, helped us connect with local businesses, and bragged about the center to anyone who would listen. Evelyn often said, "Every woman deserves the kind of strength Marissa carries." Hearing her say that never got old. It was the kind of validation I never thought I'd crave, but I did, and she gave it freely. One afternoon, a reporter from a larger Chicago paper came to interview me about the center. He asked what inspired me to start it. I could have said leadership training or my love for service, but the truth was sharper. I looked him in the eye and said, "Because I know what it feels like when the people who are supposed to have your back don't, and you want to make sure no one else has to stand alone." He scribbled it down quickly, his expression thoughtful. A week later, the quote ran in bold on the front page of the lifestyle section. Friends from Bass texted me pictures of it, some teasing, others proud. Caleb brought home extra copies. Monica rolled her eyes at the fuss, but smiled anyway. The recognition grew. We were invited to speak at conferences, asked to share our story on panels. Sometimes I still caught myself waiting for the other shoe to drop for Elena to show up, for my parents to send another guilt-ridden message. But none came. Their silence was almost as loud as mine, and I realized I didn't need their noise anymore. At the center, we celebrated milestones. One of our trainees landed her first civilian job in security management. Another finished college classes she'd been too scared to start before. Each success felt like proof that building something new was worth every hour we'd poured into it. Caleb was busier than ever with his family's business, but he made time. He came to events, stood in the back, clapping the loudest, and never missed a chance to remind me how proud he was. At night, after the long days, we'd sit by the water, wine glasses in hand, and laugh about how far we'd come. 3 years earlier, I'd walk down an aisle alone, carrying the absence of my family like a shadow. Now I walked through the doors of our center each morning to the sound of women greeting me like I was one of theirs. That was the family I'd built, not by blood, but by choice. One evening, as we locked up the center, Monica turned to me with her familiar half grin. "You realize this all started because your sister tried to ruin you, right?" I smirked, sliding the key into the lock. "Yeah, guess she underestimated me," Monica chuckled. Understatement of the decade. The street light flickered on overhead, casting a warm glow across the sidewalk. I pulled my jacket tighter against the cool Chicago wind and looked back at the center sign one last time before heading home. The words Haven Training Center stood bold against the brick, a reminder that even the worst betrayals can be the fuel for something better. By the time I got home, Caleb had dinner waiting. Evelyn had left a voicemail just to check in, and Henry had texted me a joke about one of Caleb's projects. It wasn't the family I started with, but it was the family I ended up with, and it was enough. As I stood on the porch looking out over the lake, the waves reflecting the last traces of sunset, I realized the silence from my old life no longer stung. It felt like distance, and distance was exactly what I wanted. The seasons turned quickly in Chicago, summers blazing hot along the lakefront, and winters cold enough to freeze your eyelashes. Through all of it, life carried a steady rhythm. Caleb and I built our routines. Monica and I grew the Haven Training Center into something solid, and the silence from my family stretched on like a long, empty road. But silence doesn't always mean absence. They found ways to reach me, even if I never answered. Letters arrived, carefully addressed in my mother's looping script. Some were short. "We miss you. Come home." Others longer, rambling apologies mixed with accusations. My father left voicemails that wavered between stern lectures and tired sighs. Elena, of course, was the loudest. Her messages came through email and social media, sharp and bitter. "You think you've won? You think money makes you untouchable?" She wrote once. Another time it was softer. I was jealous. "Okay, can we just talk?" I never replied. At first, ignoring them felt like a daily battle. The urge to fire back, to defend myself, to demand accountability, it burned hot. But with time, the fire cooled. I realized I didn't need their acknowledgement. Every day I woke up in a home I'd built, surrounded by people who chose me, not out of obligation, but out of love. That was enough proof of who I was. The world around me kept moving. The Haven Center expanded into the second floor, adding classrooms for job training and small offices for counseling sessions. A local news station filmed a segment about us, showing clips of women sparring on mats, learning interview skills, and sharing meals together. Watching it on television, I thought about how far I'd come since that wedding day. Caleb thrived too. His business projects grew, but he never let them overshadow. He made it clear our marriage was his priority, and that steadiness carried us through everything. Evelyn and Henry became my anchors, showing up at every event, never missing a chance to brag about me in front of anyone who would listen. They weren't filling a gap left by my parents. They were creating something new, something real. 3 years turned into a life that looked nothing like the one my family had predicted for me. They had told me I'd fail, that I'd fall apart without their guidance. Instead, I had found peace, not in shouting matches or dramatic reconciliations, but in the simple act of living well. Every so often, Monica would nudge me about the silence. "You sure you don't want to answer just once to let them know you're alive?" I always shook my head. "They can see I'm alive. They just can't touch it." The truth was, revenge didn't need to be loud. It didn't need confrontation. Revenge was me waking up every day without needing them, Revenge was the laughter in my kitchen when Caleb tried to cook and failed spectacularly. Revenge was the applause at the Haven Center graduations when women I'd trained walked across the stage to start new lives. Revenge wassailants, the kind they couldn't break, no matter how many calls or letters they sent. One evening, I sat on the back porch with Caleb, watching the sun set over the water. He poured me a glass of wine and asked, "Do you ever regret it cutting them off?" I thought for a long moment. The sky burned orange and pink, the waves carrying the colors out to the horizon. "No," I said finally. "I regret giving them so many chances before. But not this." "This was the right choice," he nodded. No argument, no lecture, just quiet agreement. That was the thing about Caleb. He never pushed, never demanded. He trusted me to know my own boundaries. The silence from my family continued. Sometimes when a new letter arrived, I'd toss it into the drawer without opening it. Other times I'd skim the words, shake my head, and drop it in the trash. They no longer had the power to twist my emotions into knots. They were voices from another life, one I had already walked away from. At the Haven Center, a young veteran once asked me how I managed to stay strong when my own family turned their backs. I smiled at her and said, "Strength isn't about who shows up for you. It's about what you build when they don't." She nodded slowly, the words sinking in. In Heries, I saw the reflection of the woman I'd become. Not the abandoned daughter, not the betrayed sister, but the leader who had carved her own path. The quiet ending wasn't dramatic. There was no showdown, no explosive confrontation. It was dinners by the lake, long walks with Caleb, Monica's sarcastic jokes during training sessions, Evelyn's warm hugs, Henry's steady advice. It was women at the Haven Center finding their footing again. It was a life lived fully, without apology, without chasing the approval of people who had never wanted to give it. One night, as I locked the front door of the center, Monica stood beside me, hands in her jacket pockets. "You realize you won, right?" she said. I laughed softly. "Won what? The whole damn thing. The family drama, the jealousy, the sabotage. You didn't just survive it. You built something better out of it. That's winning." I didn't answer right away. Instead, I looked at the sign glowing above us, Haven Training Center, and thought about all the nights I had once sat alone, convinced I'd never escape Elena's shadow. Now her shadow didn't even reach this far. "I guess I did," I said finally. The wind picked up off the lake, cool and sharp. But I pulled my jacket tighter and smiled. That was the ending I chose. Not noise, not battles, not replays of old wounds. Just quiet, just peace, just a life lived well enough that their absence no longer mattered. And that silence, unbroken and absolute, was the only revenge I ever needed. Looking back now, I don't think of my family's absence as a wound anymore. It was the lesson I needed, the push that forced me to stop chasing what was never going to be given. My silence was never weakness. It was the clearest statement I could make. I built a marriage, a career, and a community without them, and every laugh in my home, every success at the Haven Center, every sunrise by the lake proves what I already know. The best revenge isn't anger or confrontation. It's peace. It's living so fully that the people who tried to break you don't even get a mention in the story of your